everybody. Welcome back to the Games for Girls podcast. Very exciting week. I'm sure you have by now heard the news because as of yesterday, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act passed in the U.S. House. Thank goodness. But don't get too excited. If you can remember last session, it passed. But it went nowhere because Chuck Schumer and the Senate Democrats blocked it entirely. Very excited for today's guest. But before we get into that, got to tell you about today's sponsor, Good Ranchers. If you watched last week's episode, I unashamedly entered a picture of a steak I cooked from Good Ranchers. It is amazing. With the new year, of course, I have New Year's resolutions. I have goals pertaining to my health and my wellness. And I talked about last episode how I've always been big on fitness and working out, but my diet has not always been the best. But can't blame me. Grocery stores are the problem. They're filled with imported meats packed with antibiotics and hormones and seed oils and blah, blah, blah. But Good Ranchers, they deliver 100% American-sourced meat you can trust. Steakhouse quality. It is so good. You will never go back to store-bought. It's also convenient. That's the best part. It's pre-portioned, vacuum sealed. It saves time, reduce waste, and they make meal prep a breeze. So, all that to say, you can start 2025 with Good Ranchers' New Year, New Meat special. You can subscribe to any box of their premium meats, or here's the box, right? They have all kinds of meats. They have salmon, they have chicken, they have tenderloin, amazing stuff. You can check it out at goodranchers.com. Use the code Riley, all capitals, RILEY, for $25 off and free express shipping. And your choice of free ground beef, chicken, or salmon in every order for an entire year. Amazing. I encourage you to do that. Again, goodranchers.com. Put the solution in your resolution. But now we're going to get into today's episode. The wonderful guest that we are interviewing is Representative Congressman Greg Steube. He has a bunch of titles. He's from the great state of Florida. He is a member of the Republican Study Committee, which this committee they were really like the first ones to want to hear my voice at the federal level. We did a roundtable, years ago at this point. So I appreciate all of the work that they're doing. And of course, he is a U.S. Army veteran. We thank him for his service. Check out the interview here with Congressman Greg Steube. Well, Congressman Steube, thank you so much for joining the Games for Girls podcast. I was just telling you prior to recording that the last time I saw you, you were wearing a cowboy hat, which I know is a staple for you. Please know that is always welcome on the Games for Girls podcast. But just very grateful for you. I'm grateful for everything that you've done, not just on this topic, but of course in your time in the U.S. House. And so you introduced this bill last year. Here you are. You've introduced it again. It was one of Trump's top issues that he campaigned on. Actually, it was a top priority in the new House rules package. So tell us very briefly what the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act does.
Yeah, it protects girls and women's sports and protects Title IX back to the way it was supposed to be. Title IX was created by Congress in the 50s, over 50 years ago, to specifically protect women's sports and create an avenue for women to compete with other women. And obviously the current Biden administration has attacked that and allowed biological men to compete in women's sports, which I think is absolutely atrocious. And we've worked on this bill for years. When the Democrats were in control of the House, they tried to pass what was called the Equality Act that actually redefined women. Women didn't have a definition so that they could do this progressive liberal ideology all across the country. And I filed an amendment to that bill in the Judiciary Committee, and every single Democrat voted against it. And I said, you know what? This would be a good standalone bill to stand with women athletes and say, look, we don't believe that biological men should be competing in women's sports. And it's time that we take a stand on this. And you're right. This was a huge election issue, not just for Trump, but Republicans and across the country, because even Democrats and independent women don't think that men should be in their daughters' locker rooms. So it is an 80% issue across party lines. And because the Democrats and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were so left on this issue, it really turned people off and became a mainstream issue for the campaign for just about any race in the country. And so I'm very happy to see that we're taking it up very early in the Congress. I mean, this is really the first real week of votes under a new rule, and it's one of the first bills that are going to get an opportunity. This first bill that's going to pass.
You're right. The American people spoke on November 5th, and they want Trump. They want his cabinet picks. They want the America First agenda. And I've said this many times. I certainly believe that people turned out to the polls to embrace Donald Trump, but more so, and to your point, I think people turned out to the polls to reject absurdity. And that is clearly what the Democratic Party has become, entirely and thoroughly absurd. They want men and women's sports. They believe that men can get pregnant. They believe that men can breastfeed. They believe that tampons belong in boys' bathrooms. So, I mean, what are you expecting the 119th Congress? Are you expecting more Democrats to essentially double down on their position, the stance they have made very clear over the past 4 years? Or are you starting to see, and hopefully you will see more of, these Democrats beginning to slowly distance themselves from their previous voting record?
Yeah, Democrats are distancing themselves from these type of issues because they know it's so toxic for them at home. You've seen Democrats talk about this issue favorably now and say, hey, maybe it's not a good idea to have biological men and women's sports. So you're seeing them peel this back because they saw how bad the issue was for them in this past election cycle. Even in Florida, you're seeing Democrats change parties to Republicans. You're seeing the Democratic Party itself really analyze where they were on these very progressive left issues because they saw that they were completely out of touch with the American people, completely out of touch with mainstream America. And the bottom line is we need to protect women's sports. This bill does that. Since it's passed the House, I'm hoping that it'll get a quick, judicious hearing in the Senate and will move its way to the president. And when Trump gets inaugurated, this will be one of the first bills he signs.
That's it. Shortly after the election, we saw two Democrat colleagues of yours. They announced their support for keeping men out of women's sports. One of those was Congressman Moulton, which was kind of surprising to me, given he was a sponsor of the Equality Act, like you said. But he came out and said, look, I'm a dad. I have daughters. I don't want a man on the court or on the field with them. So how are you feeling now after this vote, seeing bipartisan support? It's a big step from last year where which I know you remember, I remember, it fell entirely on party lines with 219 Republicans voted in favor of protecting women and girls in sports. And last year, all 203, every last one of them, every last Democrat who voted, mothers and fathers of their own daughters, they voted in opposition. But now you've seen bipartisan support. It's a big step.
Yeah, it was actually shocking to me last Congress that not a single Democrat voted for this bill. So it's nice that there's some Democrats that have some common sense and are actually seeing the movement of this issue and how the mainstream America and Americans all across party lines want to protect women's sports. So it's great that it got bipartisan support. That'll help it as the bill moves through the process into the Senate. Hopefully there'll be some Democratic senators that you'll see support the bill when it gets into the Senate and moves the process over there. Because if it's not part of reconciliation, you need 60 votes over there. We only have 53 Republican senators. That means 7 Democrats are going to have to break party lines. But the best part of this is regardless of the votes, there's actually going to be a vote in the Senate, which Chuck Schumer prevented from happening this whole last Congress. So let's put these Democrats on the board in the Senate and see where they're at, see if they want to protect women's sports or not. And it'll put all of those Democratic senators on the board going into their elections in 2026.
Absolutely. Which there's some hope. Even just this week, we saw in the Senate a vote to move to proceed with the consideration of the Laken Riley Act. And there were several Democrats who hopped on board. So hopefully there's some more partisanship there. And again, to your point, last fall, ahead of the election, in partnership with Independent Women's Voice, something that was important to me and I hadn't seen done before was a scorecard that scored our federal elected officials on how they stand with women. It was really a first of its kind resource that, again, tells Americans who stands with women and who does not. We're allowing people to masquerade behind the phrases, the catchphrases and words they use, saying they defend women's rights when in reality, that's been made very clear that they have not. And so this scorecard had pivotal impact. It delivered a 90% win rate for those who were Riley Gaines approved. And so I was honored to put my name behind such a significant effort. Why do you think it's important for American voters to have access to this information? And why has it been so hard to know which leaders up until this point do stand with women and which ones do not?
Yeah, it's great for voters to get that information because a lot of voters are working 2 jobs. They're working every day. They're a firefighter or a policeman or a teacher or whatever the case may be. And they don't have time necessarily to do the research on the candidate. So when you're putting out that type of information on an issue that is very important to them, that issue is important to them, but they may not have the time to research it. So if they're finding out in a quick manner where their candidate sits on this issue, and that's going to be a determining factor for them as to how they're going to vote, it's very helpful for them. I have constituents all across my district that use all sorts of different types of voter guides to help make their determinations on how they're going to vote. So this obviously is a very important issue moving forward into the country. It's very helpful to them.
Absolutely. All of this momentum, this bill, of course, passing in the House, going on to the Senate. You mentioned the federal judge vacating Joe Biden's radical rewrite of Title IX nationwide. All of this momentum, it makes a lot of people, maybe like you said, your common sense, everyday American who's working jobs, who's busy with their family, they have a lot going on, and understandably so, they might think that we've won the war, the fight is over. But you and I both know that's not the case. Of course, with the new administration, there's a lot to be hopeful for, but really we're just getting started. And so with this new administration coming on board, what are some of the things that you are most optimistic about?
Well, one, they're going to protect Title IX. They're not going to use the rulemaking process to redefine what a woman is like the Biden administration did. So they're actually going to protect Title IX. They're going to keep men out of women's sports. And there's things that they can do from an executive perspective to protect that. I hope also they encourage the NCAA to take up the same position that we're advocating for. And so there's other things that they can also do from the administration side, that if you're a college or a university and you're going to allow trans or biological men in women's sports, we can take away their federal funding. So there's a lot of tools in the toolbox of the administration to be able to advocate for these type of issues by using the money that these universities get. So that's one way that they can do it. And also trying to get this, I think it's very important that this thing get a vote in the Senate, and that we have an opportunity. If this bill can get through the Senate and the president sign it, it is now in law, and nothing future administrations would be able to do would be able to thwart the true intentions of Title IX. It would protect women's sports indefinitely.
That's right. Yeah, and you mentioned the NCAA. We have seen Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, testify many times before the Senate, basically saying he's not beholden to federal law. The NCAA does not have to abide by federal law. Therefore, I believe, just as you said, if they don't have to abide by federal law, why in the world are they receiving federal funding? Congressman Steube, very grateful for you. Last question for you. What are some other priorities you have during the 119th Congress?
Well, for me personally, it's all the things that Trump ran on. It's the border. It's passing his tax package. It's making everyday Americans' lives easier. It's unleashing energy dominance and energy, drilling here in our country and not being reliant upon foreign oil. There's all these things that Trump ran on, that I ran on, that the Republicans are going to put forward. And one of the very first things we're going to do is the tax package. We had a hearing on that this week. That's something that we're going to work at very quickly. We hope to have a House tax package passed very early on so they can go to the Senate, and within a year that can pass, so that people are feeling the positive effects of that going into next year in a campaign year. So there's a lot of things, a lot that the president can do, but there's a lot that we're going to get done in the House, from energy to the border, to saving women's sports. So I want to thank you for your advocacy on this issue. And I look forward to a great Congress, Republican House, Republican Senate, and Donald Trump in the White House.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, very grateful for you and everything you've done. And thank you for your service as well. Goodness gracious, always mean to say that. And I hope I get to see you again soon. So thank you.
Anytime. Well, come on by.
As always, thank you guys for tuning in to the Gains for Girls podcast. You can see more things, all things actually, Gains for Girls at OutKick.com. Go check us out there. You can like, subscribe, share these episodes. I encourage you to do so. Make sure you're following along. Of course, I'll keep you updated. Follow me on X Riley_Gaines_. I will keep you updated with how this bill advances in the Senate. Hopefully it gets to the president's desk. Hopefully he takes executive action on day one. Lots of exciting things to come. And again, you can go to goodranchers.com, use my code Riley, all caps, for $25 off, free express shipping, and your choice of the meat of your choice for a full year. Again, goodranchers.com, code Riley. We will see you guys again next week. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. The fight to save women's sports and restore common sense is far from over, and I continue the conversation every week. So make sure to catch more content over here and subscribe to OutKick so you don't miss a thing.